And then I write on the board when the last maintenance was done in terms of changing the belts. That keeps me apprised of how often I'm changing my belts. I usually, and it varies from year to year, but I usually wind up changing the belts at this time of year before I start Christmas production. And then sometimes I have to change it before I do our Pennsylvania event, because the belts, you know, you're wasting time, as I said, because you effectively have less grit. It's kind of, if you've ever used even just regular sandpaper for sandpapering wood, as the grit wears off on the sandpaper, you're working harder and harder for nothing, basically. And you wind up working really hard and not getting a lot of work done. If I was doing something, like one of the nice things about cleaning this out is once in a rare while, it doesn't happen very often anymore, if I'm doing something small like a button, it can actually fling into the back of this and you won't be able to see it. And you can't easily access the back areas of this tray, so sometimes it winds up sitting there for a while. And this is just a good way to make sure you have nothing hanging around when you're starting a new process. If I was going to be saving my metal, say if I was working in silver and gold exclusively, and especially gold is worth it, I would be figuring out a way to keep this stuff cleaner, and I would be remelting the dust from the gold into chunks, which I could then either use again or recycle depending on my circumstances. I do not do that because it is not worth it. I'm not working with gold, and I sometimes work with gold filled, but you don't use that on a wet sander anyway. Let's see, while I'm in here, I can get in and around all the things. All the things. And then all I have to do is put this back on. Oops, except I dropped the screw. This is the screw that came from here because it doesn't have junk in it, so it's easy to put back. Ideally, I would just take off the hoods on here, but they're corroded in place. Last time I did this, I actually did take them off, but this one has re-corroded, and if I can take it off the other way, it doesn't matter which way I get it off as long as I can get it on again. This screw may need to be replaced. May have rusted too much. Let's see. They used to make these. Obviously, this is nothing fancy. This is a heavy-duty polishing arbor by Lortone. Lortone is a standard manufacturer of equipment for processing stones. Like, you know, you cut a rock into slabs and then you turn it into pretty pieces that you can use in jewelry. And Lortone does a lot of that. I may see if I can go find another screw, but I will do that later. See, I can check this now. It seems like it's fairly even. The only way to know for sure is to turn it on. When the wheel is spun, it expands out and holds the abrasive in place. I have about 1/8 of an inch You never touch it while you're while it's running, by the way. It will sandpaper your fingers. I have about 1/8 of an inch on each side of the wheel. It's not perfectly even. I'll have to watch that. Usually there's a little adjustment that I need to do when I'm first using a wheel with a new sand thing, but basically it's not walking off fast, so I'll just pay attention to it the first few times. You can see how nice and abrasive it is now. I could remove calluses with that very easily. And I'm just going to have a nice new cover there. See if this one I think this will lift off. Yep, see. If it just lifts off, it's easier. This is a little close, unfortunately. Sometimes I release the tray to make it easier to pull off. In this case, I'm spinning it and yanking it because I have good access to it. So it depends on your setup as to what you wind up doing. It's nice to think that we all have fancy setups, but a lot of times we don't. I'm going to release the tray here, which only takes 2 screws. This light is a little annoying, but it is the light that I use for over the grinders because it's really bright. It's hot too. There we go. So if I slide the tray, that lets me walk this off more easily. Comes off pretty darn easy. See, it is very smooth. And it should be smoother than that one, but it's not supposed to be this smooth. So I've basically worn it off. So that will go in the trash. While I have this out like this, I can, again, clean this. There's less gunk in here than there was in the other, because the other one is heavier abrasive, so you're chewing off more metal when you do it. And I'm not trying to get it clean. I'm just removing the majority of the stuff that's in there for a reason. That was actually used to brace something at one point. I used to have bottom drains on these, and I did for years, and the drains are still here, but they don't work anymore. They clogged up from the sediment, and I cleaned them multiple times, and it got to be just such a pain I don't worry about it anymore. I just, I don't like to let my wheels sit in water, so you'll see me scoop the water out. If you ever watch me end a session, I just make sure that the water is drained out enough so that things are not sitting around and wet. And this is a replacement screw. I can tell because it doesn't match the other screws. But the problem was the board has corroded away from years of getting wet and dry and wet and dry and wet and dry. So, yeah. Okay, so good enough. Now I need to put that new belt on there. And then I'll clean around that. And here's a new belt. It has the same thing where you've got arrows, which have to go this way. If I'm in doubt, I make sure nothing's in the way. Okay, so my belt has to go this way. So it goes on that way. You just need to make sure there's nothing in the way when you turn it on briefly like that to check. It would be easier if I didn't have this here. And it would be easier if I didn't have this here. I need it there because I need the light. This is a very janky old light that has been repaired 27 times with jury-rigged pieces of all sorts. But it works really well in terms of the brightness. If you have priced good quality lighting for processes like this, several $100s, and I'm just like, okay, I'll use the old janky one for a while longer. Every time I spin it, I'm getting it on a little bit farther. Doesn't matter which way I spin it, it won't hurt the equipment. You notice I'm careful if I push on the edge not to move this while I'm doing that, because you can abrade the bejesus out of yourself. And I wound up with a we joke about fatal paper cuts. I wound up with a really nasty paper cut from opening the mail that we got yesterday. And I was like, seriously? Try and be careful when I'm using something that's actually designed to grind away things. All right, now I need to be pushing this on a little bit more. It's close, very close. Trying to watch the edge and see how much is on the outside and how much is on the inside, just to try and get it pretty even. Then I can move this over so I'm not going to be hitting anything. I can turn this on. And it's fine. Now, as with much of the older equipment, there are safety concerns about using these kind of things. Obviously, you can sand the bejesus out of your fingers. You'll also notice this is belt driven, and there is no guard on the belt. That's pretty standard. I mean, your hand shouldn't be back there anyway. Maybe some of the newer, fancier versions have belt guards and stuff like that. Certainly some of the more compact versions that are used for, oh, they're very elaborate and they're very expensive. They're used for grinding stones and stuff like that, for cutting and polishing stones. But this is basically a motor like you would find in an old washing machine, and they've got it hooked to this big, seriously heavy-duty polishing arbor, and it works like a charm. And then it has these things on it to keep it from throwing water all over the place. I have to get this back in place. I have to put the screws back in place, because you want everything to be steady. You don't want it going anywhere while you're using it. I'll need to make sure that that cover is on correctly before I go to use it. But that's basically it. My fancy schmancy water system, because I do not have water down here, is a salvaged from a garbage pile water container. That's this guy up here. We were at a camping event, and I always scrounge through the trash at the end of that camping event, because you never know what people have thrown away. And this is just a big water container that somebody had apparently lost or broken the spigot system on. And I salvaged it because I was confident that I could find parts to make it work. I just used the top shelf. This is a set of Gorilla shelves that's been modified. I put this up here. It's got, this is a mayonnaise jar lid, or a salad dressing jar. I'm not trying to keep the water from coming out there. All I'm doing is keeping things from climbing in and evaporation from happening. This is simply irrigation supplies. It's siliconed in place so that it won't drip. But this is regular 1/4-inch tubing that you use for drip irrigation. I want to keep it out of the way, so I have a very fancy schmancy hook system here that I developed over time. And that's all there is to it. I simply have, I'll clean this here the same way as I cleaned the other one, and probably use a dustpan and brush when I'm really done. But that's all there is to it. It's not hard. It's kind of odd when you think about how the wheels work and everything. They expand. They've got these like open areas in them that when they, you know, when they spin, they expand slightly, so it holds the belt on there. Works really well. I've done a little bit of talking about this before, how you use water to keep the pieces of metal cool and to also reduce the dust and everything else like that. But that's how we change a belt. In this case, 2 belts. And now I have 2 nice neat belts. I'll write that on my maintenance chart and go on to the next thing. I have all kinds of crazy things that I need to do. Some of them are odd, like I have a UV damaged bag over here that's dumping media on the floor. I just need to pick that up and put it into a box. We need some vacuuming, we need some sweeping. I need to get the stove cleared off because it's been used for storage over the summertime, and very soon we're going to need to run wood down here in order to have it be warm enough. So, hope you enjoyed this. Another weird piece of trivia for people who, you know, get to sort of peek into the life of a jeweler and what kind of equipment can be used. These is by no means the only type of equipment that can be used. There's a dozen different kinds at least. I have different kinds of polishers, tumblers, wheels, buffers, all kinds of stuff. But this is what I use for most of my rough work at least. And then a lot of times some of the finer polish work can be done here. So, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because obviously we're going to be doing tons more. I still need to fine-tune the greenhouse and harvest some stuff from the garden and all kinds of stuff. So, until next time, bye. Oh, and don't forget to keep brainstorming because obviously we are.